What's up, guys and gals? Iceman here. Welcome to Chilling Tales. If you will, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit the bell so you're notified next time I post a video. And blessings to my patrons. Links in the description below. So I don't want to freak you guys out with this, alright? But what I have here is a tool that I think I would use if I were to be in the situation that these people were in the story I'm about to tell. Just a horrifying grizzly bear attack that actually involved 4 grizzly bears in total. It's just hideous. But check this out. I have this thing by my bed. Alright. It's a boomstick, and it has quite a bit of rounds in there. Alright, so it's probably not the most optimal for a grizzly bear, but I know these have taken down grizzly bears in the past. Alright, yeah, 7.62 by 39. It's not, again, not the most optimal. Maybe a 12 gauge with buckshot or slugs would be better. But these things just let you blast so many rounds, and they don't kick that hard. It's bigger than a 9mm. You see that sucker right there? Yeah, look at that thickie. If you were to blast a bear with these several times, I don't know. I feel like I feel safer in bear country with one of these, and they're very simple to use. Just cock back, boom, and you're ready to go. But unfortunately, in this situation, and this attack occurred in Russia. It wasn't even that long ago, just a few years ago. These folks had neither bear spray or boomsticks. All right? And I just can't imagine putting myself or my loved ones in such a situation. It's just myself and my wife right now. And our dog, German Shepherd, 9 years of age. She's a beautiful dog, extremely loyal. And I wouldn't take her into bear country without a leash, because I've told many stories on this channel that did involve dogs. And often, if your dog's not on a leash, it'll run to the bear and then lead it back to you, causing the attack. But Olga and her stepfather were out on a fishing trip in the great wilderness of Russia. All right, Olga was only 19 years old at the time. Now, in this wilderness, there were lush oak trees, vast valleys and mountains, a beautiful, clean river running through it, woodpeckers, squirrels chirping about, moose, elk, just all the beautiful wildlife that you could imagine. And the trip was going quite well. So they were fishing near the riverbed. And it started to get dark out, right? So Olga and her stepfather walked back to their camp. They went through the thicket, the woods, made it back to their campground. Now, once they got there, they had a couple fish that they were going to cook over the fire. But her stepfather remembered how he left his pole back by the river. So the two walked back there together. And that's where horror struck. So her dad was going through the brush, the weeds, just picking through it. And he heard a sort of rustling and then a sort of grunt, like a horse or something, or a pig. Olga, at this point, was about 30 yards away from him. And she was looking for the pole as well, because this pole was set on the riverbank with a rig on it. And they weren't sure if they had a fish on it or not, but they had to go back to get it. And that's when the heinous sounds occurred. Now, what happened after this is just so horrifying. I mean, this girl was on the phone with her mom as this bear was attacking her. But so the grizzly approached the stepdad, and he looked up and he saw it coming at him. And he tried to duck and put his shoulder into it, but it was just too late. It was probably attacking him the way that she did because there were cubs around. As many of you know, and I've discussed this extensively on this channel, when a mother grizzly bear, a sow, has cubs in her vicinity, she will often neutralize any target that she sees to be a threat. This isn't always the case with black bears. They're a bit more skittish and might try to climb trees or whatnot. But a grizzly sow, if she at all considers you a risk, she's coming after you. And it's often best, to my knowledge, to play dead in these situations because she's not looking to eat, generally. She's just looking to get you to be no longer a threat, to neutralize you. But of course, this attack turned out a bit differently. And it kind of threw a wrench at this whole theory and course of action, where it wasn't your general attack. But the stepdad put his shoulder into it, and the mother bear grabbed him by the shoulder and just heaved him over her shoulder, like, woof, and just slammed him into the ground. And I've seen a video on a polar bear doing this with a husky dog. Just the power that these animals possess is horrifying. And this thing's skull was like this big. You know, imagine a skull 3 times the width of yours, and just these gaping jaws. And it wrapped the jaws around his neck and began crushing his neck, just like this. And it crushed his, and he tried to stuff his neck in, but he couldn't quite get it. And Olga was standing over here, and she looked into this horrifying scene, and she saw the bear just stomping on his face, just stomping him with his paws, like it was trying to crush him into the ground. You know how bears will often forage, and they'll dig for grubs, and they'll dig through just old dead stumps. It was doing something similarly to his body. So Olga could hear the crunches, the screams, the sounds of terror and horror, the sounds of death, while all this was occurring to one of the few men in her life who loved and cared for her. So, upon watching this, she was in a sort of way frozen in fear. Again, she didn't have any form of defense on her, neither did her stepdad. So they were just watching this scene play out, and it was happening to him. Just the blood, the crunching of bones, the digging into his flesh. Now, this wasn't a predatory attack, because the man was neutralized at this point. His body was just being ragdolled. The bear grabbed him by the shoulder, lunged him around again, slammed him into the ground, and at this point he was just wobbling. He was just ragdolled. Like he was dead. I think he was dead at this point. And that's when the bear turned and looked into Olga's eyes, her young, impressionable, fearful eyes. The young woman, gazing upon this scene, filled with fear and horror, looked for an escape. It was getting dark. There was thicket everywhere, but the trail was leading back to their camp. A very thin trail with a bunch of weeds integrated throughout it. So she turned and began to run. Now, Olga was athletic, very thin girl, about 5'8", 5'9", played some volleyball, outdoorsy. So she was able to hold her own when it came to physical prowess with what she had to offer anyway. But of course, that didn't stand a chance against this grizzly sow. So Olga was running down the trail for about a few seconds. Looking back, this bear just started, and she could feel the tremors of this thing as it was approaching her. And in an instant, it grabbed her by the thigh with its yellow, bacteria-ridden 3-inch fangs and took her to the ground. Olga covered her neck and her back like this, and the bear was on top of her, standing tall and strong, looking around as though, what does it do now? There was something different about how it was attacking Olga, and we know this from the phone discussion that she had with her mom shortly after and during. But in this situation, it's almost as though the bear knew that Olga wasn't that much of a threat. And it was almost as though the bear was conflicted within itself. I'm not sure if I'll dare say that maybe it knew it was doing something wrong. But I think at most, the grizzly just kind of knew that it just had to get out of there. But it wasn't quite finished with her yet. Of course, that changed after the blood was drawn. So the bear was on top of Olga, and it began pressing her into the ground like it was trying to crush her body. And then it stuck its jaws between her neck and her shoulder blade and just began gnawing on her. Like my German Shepherd did this one time with a possum, where it grabs the body of the animal and it just crunch, 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 crunch. It goes up and down, up and down, up and down, and just crushing all the bones, just trying to sever or destroy the spine, trying to paralyze the creature. And that's what this mother grizzly was doing to Olga. Just up and down her neck, making its way up and down her upper arm, and even into her back. Then it flopped her onto her back and began digging into her abdominal region, just devouring her flesh, just tearing her clothes off, exposing her white, pale, clean skin, and it just began bleeding profusely, the wounds festering. And what's crazy is it had 3 cubs that were not far from this scene, and they were sitting there in the brush with their ears up, like looking on, just curious, like what the hell is mother doing, right? So they were just watching this whole thing play out while the mother was digging into Olga, and then every once in a while looking up and then just checking out the vicinity, making sure there weren't any more threats, almost as though it was contemplating whether or not it should escape, if it should just bail on the whole thing. But unfortunately, that's not what happened. So the bear backed off after a few minutes, and she was just standing there in front of Olga, just a few feet away, just huffing with her mouth open, just gaping jaws, and just ooze and spit and some blood from Olga just drooling out of her mouth. And you see this often when bears get in fights with one another. They're very endurance-driven, but nonetheless, they'll often stop and take deep breaths while contemplating their next move. And that's exactly what happened here, giving Olga the opportunity to call her mother. So this massive bear was like 5 or 10 feet away from Olga, just tongue hanging out of its mouth, jaw just hanging up, and just the soulless eyes, just kind of looking around, just contemplating what to do. And then it would back up a little bit more, boom, 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 and then just and then it looked over at its cubs were like, what the hell is going on? You know, its cubs were looking at this whole scene just dumbfounded. And that's a really dangerous thing when cubs witness their mother do something like this against humans, because it almost impressions it upon them that humans can potentially be prey, and they're not all that dangerous, because the cubs are seeing their mom get away with this. She just mauled a full-grown man, and now it's mauling the hell out of this 19-year-old vulnerable female. So these cubs are very impressionable. They're watching this go on, and they're like, oh my God, They're like, these are food sources apparently, And the mother's just backed up with her head down. But in this opportunity, Olga pulled out her cell phone and called her mom. And her words were, "Mom, I'm in so much agony. Mom, she's killing me. Mom, she attacked him." And the mother was listening to these words, not really knowing what she was talking about. All the while just hearing the crunching, the scraping, the moaning, the grunting. It was just so confusing to her over the phone. Her mom's sitting on the phone just like, what is going on here? And Olga was losing her breath, going in and out of consciousness. And you could hear the bear. The bear was conflicted again, as if it wasn't sure if it wanted to finish the job. And it left her mangled, destroyed body there right in front of her, just backed off and would just breathe and look around and consider the cubs. It didn't do the same thing that it did with the stepdad. The stepdad had made sure he was dead. But with Olga, like I said, I feel like the bear knew deep within that she just wasn't that much of a threat. But the sow still wanted to do what had to be done. They will do anything to protect their cubs. And Olga was just the limiting factor there between her and her cubs' safety. So the phone cut out, and apparently it went on for 30 or 40 minutes, the mom just listening to this, not knowing what the hell was going on. And of course, the phone cuts out. So then what she does is she tries to call her husband, who was Olga's stepdad, who was dead. So the phone rings and rings and rings, no answer. The woman didn't know that he was deceased at this point. Several minutes go by. And all of a sudden, Olga's mother gets a call again. Olga's words in this final call were, "Mom, it doesn't hurt anymore. Mom, don't worry. Mom, I love you. Mom, please forgive me. Please forgive me for not being a good daughter," or something like that, or the best daughter I could be, or something like that. She was a teenager. I'm sure they had their family dramas. But at that point, the phone eventually cut out, and Olga's mother called authorities, of course, and her brother, her mom's brother, along with a rescue team, some park rangers, this and that, they scoured the area, and they found the stepdad's body deceased, and they found Olga's body half-eaten. Between these phone calls, the bear was eating Olga. It left her there half-eaten, all right? And the cubs were all eating her too. I mean, it's just, what a hideous thing. That's the thing, is eventually these cubs, they realized and knew that this was a good opportunity. And we're just going to go make a feast out of this thing. And it went from a defensive attack to neutralize the target into a predatory attack where they decided, let's just eat these people. Let's just eat these people, starting with the girl. So the authorities caught them there. All four of these bears just just nomming down on Olga's body. And of course, they shot all the bears dead right there. I don't know what sort of rifles they used. I mean, they might have used something like this. What a horrifying scene. And they fetched the body of the stepdad, which was mangled but not eaten. Olga's body was a quarter to half eaten. And of course, she was dead on the scene. But that's how that one went. Let me know in the comments below. What do you guys think about this hideous bear attack? What could have been done differently here to avoid the situation? And if you want to support me, become a patron. linked in the description below, and I will see you guys next time with more chilling tales from the Iceman.